So tonight we are getting into the historical overview of transition, and in order to make this a little bit more interactive, we have different sections. The first section is going over the civil rights and rehabilitation and work-related types of pieces of legislation. The first piece that we're going to talk about is the deinstitutionalization component. Then we're going to talk next about Olmstead versus LLC. Finally, we'll lead into those work-related Americans with Disabilities Act and Rehabilitation Act of 1990 and 1973, respectively. So for civil rights and disabilities, this movement in the United States was huge during the 70s and 60s. We know in terms of individuals with disabilities that there were three pieces in terms of the timeline and what's moved those, contributing to the deinstitutionalization of in the United States. That was the development of medications for treatments, social shifts through media, and federally funded studies implementing laws and provided funding in terms of Medicaid and Medicare and things like that. So if we're taking a look at our timeline, we see that in 1946, things kind of kicked off with the National Mental Health Act. And this was research that was done on mental health treatment based on findings and based on the need determined by the National Institute of Mental Health. In 1954, the FDA, based on those studies, approved medications to treat psychosis. Finally, 1955, there was more research that was determined to be needed based on the Mental Health Act of 1955 due to the outrageous ratio of individuals in institutions outnumbering the ratio of service providers. So you can see there the ratio of psychiatrists, psychologists in social health, and social workers providing services to people in institutions was much lower than the number of individuals in institutions. Well, it's a huge problem and needed more research to kind of figure out what we can do to better serve those individuals. In terms of the social impact and understanding what life in an institution was like, there were two things that happened in the 70s. The One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest movie by Kessie was introduced in 1975 so that people got an idea of what it was like to live in an institution. Also, Rivera's documentary on Willowbrook in 1972 contributed to people's understanding of what it was like to live in an institution. In 1980, Carter signed in the Mental Health Act. It funded more community centers. This was federal funding, of course, but was repealed by Reagan in 1981 to shift that federal funding to state block grants. In terms of the Olmstead versus LC, transfer of institutional care is a less and taking into the account the state. So this all led into more pieces of legislation from the early 2000s. 2004 to be exact. Studies revealed that there were 3 times as many people, mentally ill people in jail than there were in institutions, which is in a different direction where we're not institutionalizing people anymore, but we are not caring for them and not providing the services for them that needed to be provided. Therefore, in 2010, Obama signed the Affordable Health Care Act, which mandated insurance companies and cover the mental health care as one of the 10 essential benefits. In addition, it's important to remember that 3 federal statutes govern the rights of individuals who are institutionalized currently. Those include the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and the Civil Rights Act of Institutionalized Persons Act of 1980. People who are in institutions currently have the basis of legal action, and their rights are determined based on those 3 laws. So before we switch over to rehabilitation or work-related legislation, make sure that we are ready to change groups.